Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
After June 3rd, Gazi al-Yawer will be the Iraqi president. He is a member of the Shumar tribe, one of the largest and strongest tribes in Iraq, which led a violent struggle against the former President Saddam Hussein. For many years, al-Yawer lived outside of Iraq. However, he did not join any political organization in those years. He returned to Iraq after the collapse of Saddam Hussein's regime. Sheikh Gazi Ajil al-Yawer was chosen as the president, thus making him the 6th president of the Republic of Iraq since its creation in 1958. Coincidentally, it was the same year al-Yawer was born in al-Mosul. He was born after the monarch rule. Sheikh Gazi al-Yawer is the nephew of Sheikh Mohsen al-Yawer, leader of the Shumar tribe, which is a well-established tribe in Iraq and in neighboring countries. Al-Shumar tribe members consist of both Sunnis and Shiites. Some believe that al-Yawer represents the Iraqi tribal front. Others, however, see him as the modern leader of the new Iraq. Now, he is faced with the responsibility of leading his country amidst the deteriorating security situation. Last month, during a secret ballot, al-Yawer was chosen as the last president of the Iraqi Interim Governing Council. He will take over control from the Coalition Provisional Authority in June 30th. Gazi al-Yawer is a 46-year-old civil engineer. In his traditional Arab attire, he reminds us of Iraq's nature and diversity. He captures the attention of Westerners by changing the standard image of past Iraqi presidents. The most essential characteristics of al-Yawer is that he maintains good relations with Arab neighbors and Iraqi groups, especially during the opposition struggle in London. Al-Yawer remained close to them, but away from all party conflicts and religious differences. Al-Yawer made a clear impression on his Arab neighbors. It is said that he is the ideal bridge between Iraq and the Arabs in the region, noting that he lived in Saudi Arabia and graduated from one of its universities. Some people feel that the responsibility of this man, who is from a large tribe and has good connections, is not to run the state. Also, he does not have the veto power to make historic and vital decisions. His main goal, however, would be to introduce his new country to the world.
Iraqis saw their first post-Saddam Hussein president and government named by US occupation and Iraqi officials amid another day marred by bloody attacks and killings. At least 25 people were killed and many wounded by an explosion which tore through the Baghdad headquarters of a main Kurdish party, the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. The blast was close to Iraq's foreign ministry and an entrance to the Green Zone compound where the US-led occupation administration in Iraq is based. Shooting rang out after the explosion. At least 7 other blasts struck inside the heavily fortified headquarters of the US-led occupation. An Iraqi policeman said on condition of anonymity that at least 3 mortar rounds had impacted inside the Green Zone, but he did not know if there had been any casualties. He believed one had hit near the presidential palace where US occupation governor Paul Bremer's offices are located. And in southeastern Baghdad, Iraqi police said that an American soldier was killed and a 16-year-old Iraqi man injured when a homemade bomb was detonated during the passing of an American convoy consisting of 3 Humvee vehicles. Meanwhile, a governing council representative announced a deal for the U.S. occupation military to stop patrols around the cities of Najaf and Kufa for 48 hours and for police to redeploy in an attempt to halt clashes between the occupation forces and Iraqi fighters loyal to Sayyid Muqtada Sadr. This report has more.
American officials announced that U.S. occupation troops agreed to suspend patrols in the Iraqi Shiite Muslim holy city of Najaf and Kufa for 48 hours in a bid to probe a shaky truce with the Mahdi army loyal to Muslim cleric Sayyid Muqtada al-Sadr.
But we continue to stay focused on a peaceful solution. We are encouraging a peaceful solution. We are looking forward to the political side coming forward with a set of mechanisms so that we can stop this fighting that's going on down in Kufa, because at the end of the day, you'd much rather solve this peacefully and quietly than with a lot of noise and a lot of weapons.
In a bid to quell the fighting between U.S. occupation soldiers and fighters loyal to al-Sadr, Haidar al-Sufi, a representative of Governing Council member Ahmad Barak, said the arrangements were hatched by the U.S. occupation officials, military commanders, Shiite Muslim leaders, and Najaf Governor Adnan al-Zurfi. Zurfi said Iraqis police could deploy in the center of Najaf as early as Tuesday, and this could be timed with a withdrawal by pro-Sadr's fighters. Sadr's office on Monday night accused U.S. troops of breaching the truce after tanks fired shells on a group of fighters and reoccupied one of Najaf's main squares for the first time since Thursday's ceasefire deal. Meanwhile, the U.S. military said that 2 more of its soldiers were killed in a roadside bombing in southeastern Baghdad. The death brings to 7 the number of occupation troops killed in the past 48 hours.
Some 52 suspects, including Palestinians, Syrians, and an Iraqi, are under interrogation for Thursday's deadly riots in Beirut's southern suburbs, including setting on fire the Labor Ministry. The Daily Al-Mustaqbal said Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri informed Cabinet at a special meeting on Monday he had been tipped about preparations for violent confrontations during labor protests. Sarah Khoury has a story.
The Lebanese government denounced deadly fuel riots in one of Beirut's impoverished southern suburbs last week, in which 5 people were killed and 50 injured. It condemned violence against the army and the deaths of civilians. Information Minister Michel Smeha told journalists after a special cabinet meeting the government would compensate the families of the 5 dead with payments of 50 million Lebanese pounds or $33,330 each. The government also said it would pay the hospital costs of the injured. The cabinet has asked the defense and justice ministries to report on the clashes between rioters and troops that broke out last Thursday in the southern Hail Salom neighborhood. Hundreds of people took to the streets in response to a strike called by the CGTL trade union, protesting against high fuel prices and their government's economic policies. According to the police, firefighters initially used water cannons to disperse about 600 demonstrators who retaliated with stones. Troops then opened fire. The cabinet also urged Hariri to call talks with unions to find solutions to the economic crisis gripping Lebanon. On Saturday, the head of the Shiite movement Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, accused groups linked to the U.S. Embassy of having a hand in the violence. He called for an urgent meeting of the cabinet as well as an investigation to determine who was to blame for Thursday's clashes. Hariri had called for an investigation into why prices of gasoline were not reduced following a cabinet decree 2 weeks ago. An official report by the Finance Ministry found that Energy Resources Minister Ayoub Hamid, a political ally of House Speaker Nabih Berri, was behind the delay which cost Lebanese consumers more than 2.3 billion liras and fueled labor anger. Speaker Berri, who also has allies in the General Labour Confederation, CGTL, which called for the protest, defended the union and 3 of his allies in the government who took part in the demonstrations.
Saudi Arabia's leaders have assured the world they were in full control after 21 people were killed in a shooting and hostage-taking rampage at the weekend, the second major strike in a month on the Saudi oil industry. Sarah Khoury has a story.
Britain warned more attacks were probable in the kingdom, the world's biggest oil exporter. Britain is the 2nd largest investor in Saudi Arabia behind the United States. A Briton was among 19 foreigners killed in the attack in the eastern city of Khubar, which, like other oil hubs in Saudi Arabia, is home to a large Western workforce. Saudi Arabia's King Fahd said, quote, "These criminal acts by deviants will only strengthen the kingdom's resolve to fight terrorism, as security forces stepped up efforts to crack down on Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda network." President George W. Bush called Crown Prince Abdullah to condemn the attack and praised Saudi security forces for saving many hostages. But as a picture of the bloodbath were beamed around the world, Western countries urged their citizens to either leave Saudi Arabia or not go to the kingdom unless it was essential. Saudi authorities, who dropped commandos onto rooftops in the Oasis compound to end the hostage standoff, set up security checkpoints across the country after 3 of the militants escaped by using hostages as human shields. Officials said the 9 hostages, including some Westerners, were killed by the militants. Westerners were also among those killed earlier when the militants opened fire on the Al-Khubar Petroleum Center building housing offices of major Western oil firms and then swept through housing compounds. A purported Al-Qaeda statement on the internet said the group carried out the attack. Al-Qaeda's top leader in Saudi Arabia, Abdul Aziz al-Mukrin, vowed 2004 would be bloody and miserable for the kingdom.
Oil prices jumped $1 a barrel after the attack in Saudi Arabia, which did not interrupt oil flows from the world's biggest exporter. U.S. light crude was up more than $1, some 3% at $41.01 a barrel.
Traders fear the attack in Khubar could be the start of a concerted Al-Qaeda offensive to disrupt Saudi supplies at a time when oil prices are already high enough to threaten world economic growth. Prices are still short of a recent 21-year peak of $41.85 a barrel. Ministers from the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries meet on Thursday in Beirut, where they are expected to agree a rise in crude supply limits of up to 11%. The only producer with significant spare capacity, Saudi, has already vowed to lift output about 10%. Traders have already priced in a risk premium attached to supply security in the Middle East, home to 2/3 of world petroleum reserves. The Khubar attack came 5 days ahead of a Beirut meeting of OPEC producers, from which Saudi Arabia has proposed a rise in output limits of between 2.0 million and 2.5 million barrels per day. Speaking at a news conference in Beirut ahead of the organization's 131st extraordinary meeting, OPEC spokesman Dr. Omar Farouk Ibrahim explained the reasons behind OPEC's recent cut in oil production by 1 million barrels per year.
We are concerned about global security and stability, whether in producer countries or consumer countries. We're especially concerned about security in our member countries, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, on the basis of studies, general pattern in the industry. OPEC had decided that if it continued with the production of oil at the rate it was going at the beginning of the year, in the first quarter, into the second quarter, we are likely to have a glut on the markets. And therefore decided that we needed to cut 1 million barrels per day.
He also highlighted the significance of the Lebanon meeting.
OPEC believes that by coming to hold this extraordinary meeting of the conference here in Beirut at this time, we will be identifying with the good government and good people of Lebanon in their encouraging reconstruction efforts.
Iraqi leaders have cut a face-saving deal with the United States and United Nations on a president and government to lead the country out of occupation. After 2 days of bitter confrontation, the United States and UN envoy Lakhdar Ibrahimi finally accepted the appointment of Gazi al-Yawer, an influential tribal chief, to succeed Saddam Hussein in the largely ceremonial role of president. In an 11th hour compromise, elder statesman Adnan Pajaji, who was the U.S. and UN preferred candidate, turned down the job. But in return, the Iraqi Governing Council agreed to dissolve itself with immediate effect and accepted a cabinet lineup under Prime Minister-designate Iyad Alawi. That included only 2 other council members among 26 cabinet ministers and 5 junior ministers. The lineup also included 6 women, reflecting the balance among Iraq's ethnic and religious groups, 2 vice presidents, 1 a Shiite and another Kurd. The swearing-in took place in a former Saddam palace, which is now the headquarters of U.S. occupation forces. In his first comments after his appointment, al-Yawer said Iraqis expected nothing less than full sovereignty.
We, the Iraqis, also look forward for being granted full sovereignty through a Security Council resolution to enable us to rebuild a free, independent, democratic, and federal unified homeland.
Arab and international reactions poured in after the announcement of the Iraqi interim government. The U.S. was upbeat about the lineup. National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice called it terrific, and U.S. President George W. Bush said the interim government had the talent to guide the nation.
Today in Baghdad, UN Special Envoy Lakhdar Brahimi and Iraqi Prime Minister Iyad Alawi announced the members of Iraq's new interim government. Consulting with hundreds of Iraqis from a variety of backgrounds, Mr. Brahimi has recommended a team that possesses the talent, commitment, and the resolve to guide Iraq through the challenges that lie ahead. Dr. Alawi is a strong leader. He endured exile for decades and survived assassination attempts by Saddam's regime. He was trained as a physician, has worked as a businessman, and has always been an Iraqi patriot. The new 33-member cabinet announced today reflects new leadership, drawn from a broad cross-section of Iraqis. 5 are regional officials, 6 are women, and the vast majority of government ministries will have new ministers. I had no role. I mean, occasionally somebody said, this person may be interested or that, but I had no role in picking. 0.
At a state ceremony in Jerusalem, Prime Minister Sharon today welcomed the Prime Minister of Ethiopia to Israel. But relations between Sharon and his own Likud faction are not the least bit diplomatic these days, despite intensive ongoing mediation efforts to win the backing of the Finance Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Some Likud MKs said today that Sharon is facing an intifada within his own party over his disengagement plan. This follows yesterday's fiery Likud faction meeting that was cut short after MK Nomi Blumenthal called Sharon arrogant and condescending.
Yesterday, I asked Prime Minister Sharon to stop his plans. He is going to destroy his party. He is going to destroy his leadership. And I asked him to stop because all the Likud against him, the party against him, and his ministers of the Likud against him.
I think that it's very great that in the Likud party we have pluralism of ideas, that we can speak about them in our party committees, and I think that it's very important, and it will be very great for our exchanging ideas between the members of parliament.
President Moshe Katsav today expressed concern that the country's democracy is showing signs of erosion. This at a conference held by the Israel Democracy Institute at his residence in Jerusalem. During the event, the Democracy Institute presented a report on attitudes of Israeli youth to democracy. According to the document, a majority of the country's young people desire stronger leadership. Speakers from the Institute also related to the growing phenomenon of draft dodging in all sectors of Israeli society. Chief Justice Aharon Barak, who was at the event, said that he was pleased with the current state of the country's democracy, especially since Israeli society is confronted on a daily basis with such difficulties as terror and warfare. 2 Qassam rockets fired by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip hit the Negev town of Sderot this morning. No one was injured in the attacks, but one of the rockets hit a factory in the industrial zone, causing serious damage just half an hour before workers were scheduled to arrive. The second Qassam landed in an open field. It was originally believed that the missiles were of an advanced variety not previously used against Israeli targets, though that claim was later proven untrue. In other news, the Tel Aviv District Court today rejected a suit brought by businessman David Apple against the Israel Broadcasting Authority and its political correspondent, Ayala Hassan Nesher, for a report she did on the so-called Bar-On Hebron affair in 1997. The report alleged that Apple used his influence to aid in the appointment of current Likud MK Roni Bar-On to the position of Attorney General. Bar-On was quickly removed from the post following his appointment. Apple sued the IBA for libel following the report, but the Tel Aviv judge ruled that the businessman's version of the story was an insult to intelligence, though he did add that Hassan Nesher's piece did not allow Apple to respond to the allegations. The IBA was awarded 50,000 shekels in the ruling.
On Thursday, a new wave of cadets from the Ascaris military camp in the province of Diyala graduated from the new Iraqi army. The first wave included 616 officers, and the second wave had 335 members from the new army.
2 new waves of cadets graduated from the Iraqi army at the military camp of Karakesh in the province of Diyala. The first wave had 616 fighters, carrying the name the leader of the group.
Each member goes through basic training in weapons, combat, civil training, reading maps, and intelligence, as well as other things like general health. This group of officers in this class has high morale, as you can tell from the looks on their faces.
At the start of the celebration, the graduates marched to military music in front of the commanders.
There are changes. We have made changes in the new Iraqi army. Before, the reforms were done under pressure, suffering, hunger, and pain. Thank God, after 45 days, we are president of the Karkush military camp in Dalia. There are changes. We are comfortable, not like before. There is more pay.
The Army Commander-in-Chief confirmed that the new Iraqi army does not belong to a specific group or particular party. It is an army to protect the people and the Constitution. The Army Commander-in-Chief challenged the graduate fighters to be superior officers with commitment to the law and fighting negative incidents without mercy, so as not to allow Iraq to become the playground for settling accounts. From the Karkush military camp, Ahmed Jamdulimi, Al-Iraqiyya.